So I think it's a good time to start, and I would like to welcome everyone to this special session called Engaging Young Patients and Parents in Medical Devices. My name is Inês Alves. I'm based in Évora, Portugal, and I'm a patient advocate for rare bone diseases since 2013, and leading a patient organization called Endo Portugal, and member of multiple initiatives around rare bone diseases. I will be one of your facilitators today for the first part of this session. My fellow moderator is Tasha Zaik, who will help me to guide you through the second part of the session. We are absolutely delighted to be part of the Patient Engagement Open Forum. The Patient Engagement Open Forum is definitely a chance to bring all stakeholders together to really look to our healthcare systems and the role of patients and caregivers, and to the work that it can be done together for better inclusion and empowerment. We really are working towards stronger patient engagement.
Welcome as well from my side, everyone. My name is Tasha Zaitz. I'm the host of Faces of Digital Health podcast, which is focused on digital health innovation and how healthcare systems around the world adopt technologies. And I also work for a healthcare IT company, Better, where I'm really focused on medication safety from the broadest possible perspective. And I talk to clinicians that use our systems through our community, where I try to also bring in the insights from what's happening on the market, what are the new technologies that are coming in the space to increase patient safety when it comes to medications. As mentioned by Ines, we are really excited to have you all here. I would just like to emphasize that this is aimed to be an interactive session, so don't be afraid to tell us where you're from, tell us what's your role, why you're interested in this topic, share your thoughts. When the speakers are gonna talk, do share questions that you might have for them, so we can get some feedback for you on those in that regard. We're very excited to have a session where stakeholders are going to be brought together from very different fields, so we can really highlight the topic that we're here for today.
Thank you, Taza. Now it's a great honor to introduce our excellent panel of speakers today. We are going to start with the young patients' perspectives presented in a short video from ICANN, the International Children Advisory Network. We are also going to hear the stories of a few young patients, what it's like to live with a medical chronic condition, and how they feel by using medical devices. Then we are going to speak with Omer, who is presenting the parents' perspectives. Amy is a mother of 2 children living with diabetes type 1 and has vast experience with different medical devices. Next, we'll have Elisa Ferrer from Accelerator. She's going to present the medtech sector perspective and share about their collaboration with children and young patients in a short video. We also have the researcher perspective represented by Leanne West. Our last speaker will be Begonia Nafra from San Juan de Dios Hospital in Barcelona, Spain, who is going to talk about the new ITF project, and how it develops further cooperation with children and young patients. Today we'll have a panelist discussion between most of our speakers and interactive polls as well.
Maria, can we go to the next slide? Okay, awesome. So here you can see the exact agenda that we will cover today. As mentioned by Ines, various topics, various speakers, different views, and of course a very important component of this event is you. So I can already see in the chat that we have people from all across Europe joining us, so that's exciting for knowledge and experience sharing. And again, I would just like to invite you to use the chat, to use the Q&A box, and be active in the interactive polls that we will share with you. Because, you know, by discussing, sharing, and engaging with each other, we can really take action to actually engage pediatric, young patients, and parents in the design and the development of medical devices, so they can really address the needs of the patients and help them to the best of their ability. Oh, we also have somebody from New York, so really exciting.
Good. And in order for us all to get an enjoyable experience, it's good to present some house rule keeping. The session will be recorded. The recording will be shared publicly after the session. And based on the principles of co-creation, we will leave all channels open for you to communicate with us. That's definitely a strong point. We'll have time during the panelist discussion for you also to ask your questions. Don't be shy, and please use the Q&A box to ask your questions to the speakers. We hope to answer most of the questions. Not all will be possible, so bear with us, but we'll make the best of it. You will be muted as there will be many other people attending this webinar. If you want to share your feedback, please use the chat box. And let's definitely make this session very interactive together.
I think I mentioned a few times by now that this is an interactive session, and it's really nice to see how engaged everyone already is. But, you know, just to make things as smooth as possible, we do want to highlight some rules regarding Q&A. All questions will be shown with the name of the person who asked the questions. Please be respectful to others as you would be in a live meeting, even though we can't see you on camera. If there's a question that you really like, do upvote that so we don't have repetitions and we can see what might be interesting for the broadest number of participants. And as mentioned, not all questions will be answered live, but we'll try to address those even after the event.
And in order for us to get to know you a little bit also, and to understand what are your interests in this session, we will take some polls now. Please share with us your answers via Zoom polls, and the questions will pop up as this one. So you can select one single answer here. Please do that, and we will read the results very soon. Thank you. So the question is, which stakeholder group do you represent? This is pretty much easy. So we are getting to a full room of answers now, just missing a few. More than 80% have already answered. Just more 5 seconds and we can close this poll. So far, we have the majority of our participants is from the pharmaceutical and biotech companies representatives. Welcome. And we have an even response from patients and caregivers and patient organization representatives. So this is really good to see how things are presenting so participative. So next question is for you to rate your understanding and knowledge about the involvement of children and young patients and parents, of course, in the development of medical devices. So you are really speeding in the answer for this question. It's really good. And for the answers we are getting, I think this webinar will be very useful and hopefully enlightening to many of the participants. So let's wait for, okay, we are almost getting to the full participation for this question. And so far, the majority, 48% of you replied that your understanding and knowledge is poor. Let's improve this. And 25% responded as acceptable. So thank you so much for participating and for answering. And now let's understand what is the main reason for your interest in this topic and absolutely why this brought you here. So you have a list of different possibilities, and again, you're speeding in the response. Thank you for that. And seeing a very even response so far. Let's see how this progresses. Nearly there. So far, reaching out 1 minute for this, understanding how to enhance patient engagement in medtech sector, it's really getting the majority of votes, 40%, as understanding the perspective of children, young patients, and parents in medical devices is reaching 57%. And also I have to mention that understanding the regulatory framework around patient engagement in the medtech sector reached out 47%. Thank you very much. So let's go to the fourth question. Don't let this take you too long, but this will be a very speedy question. Have you been involved in any of the following groups in the design and development of medical devices? So you can select different choices in this one. So we are more or less at the middle of the responses, and one is really higher than the others. Okay, so far, again, thank you for answering. So far, none of the above. And we have had 25% answering adult patients over 18. So it's really good to see that you have willingness to understand this topic, and it's really an opportunity to hear experts in this arena, and welcoming you also with your questions and progressing with this involvement further. So thank you so much again for being so active and engaged in responding these questions. So going ahead to our presentation, we are now absolutely delighted to present you a pre-recorded video featuring young patients from the International Children Advisory Board Network, ICANN. They are going to share what is their experience with medical devices and how they would like to develop patient engagement in this sector. I hope you enjoy the video.
Hi, my name is Reese. I'm a junior at Michigan State University. I'm studying psychology, and I've lived with an invisible illness for 10 years of my life. So.
Hi, I'm Penelope. I'm 14 years old, and I live in Boerne, Texas.
Hi, I'm Cordelia. So I have an illness called idiopathic pulmonary arterial hypertension, PH for short. I'm 17 years old and a senior in high school.
My name's Olivia. I'm 18 years old and I have type 1 diabetes.
I'm Isabella. I've had a lot of heart issues and lung issues.
I live with type 1 diabetes, and so I have a little tiny pump that is connected to me at all times during the day through a tubing, and then insulin is fed to me all during the day. I don't have any challenges other than like normal day-to-day stuff. Sometimes it rips out. Sometimes a sensor is malfunctioning somehow, and I have to do new sites, which can be kind of a bummer, but it's part of living with it. So.
I'm orthodox. I don't say a lot because I am embarrassed about it, but I just explain a little bit about it so they understand why. In those couple months that I did wear them, I would have regretted that.
I'm fortunate enough that nitric oxide, inhaled nitric oxide, actually really, my lungs really respond to that, my arteries. So I'm almost like I don't have pulmonary hypertension when I'm on nitric oxide. So, but the issue is that that's only available in a hospital setting. The times when I was home, I was on oxygen 24/7.
I use 2 medical devices to help my type 1 diabetes. I use an insulin pump, and I also use a continuous glucose monitor. So the challenges I have with using an insulin pump and a CGM is probably kinking the cannula or having malfunction errors just by being active and always having something attached to you. It's sometimes difficult when there's not pockets or a place to put the device.
Yes, I use a medical device. Very often I have heart monitors, and I also have event monitors, which are heart monitors, but they last for longer, like a month. I do have challenges with my heart monitors and event monitors because the new ones that they have are great and super small and super portable because they're just one patch on your chest. But the stickers they use, it really irritates the skin and it rips it off. And since you have to put it in the same place a lot, the skin starts to get very irritated and it gets very raw and leaves rashes.
The only suggestion I would have is taking in input from patients. They are the best experts in all of this, especially young patients. For most of them, they've lived with it their entire lives or most of their lives. So hearing any feedback from them is really important in research.
Make them small.
It's quite challenging for a pediatric patient.
I would improve the device by making it smaller or more easily being able to put it somewhere on yourself, because it's difficult being a woman and trying to put it somewhere because it's not ideal. And then maybe making it more functionable if you're going to be active, because it's not the most practical. I think my opinion has been considered by the doctor, the manufacturer. I think a lot of opinions have, and over the years, insulin pump sizes have gotten smaller, but I don't think they're to a point yet where it's small enough to be comfortable. I could be involved with the development of the device by testing out different devices, not just in the clinical perspective, but on the everyday life perspective, especially from being a person who's young and has been living with the disease for a long time.
the device works really well and it gets you the data you need, but also thinking about like how it affects the daily life of the person. I think we need to change make it more comfortable to wear, because oftentimes people will stop wearing it because it's uncomfortable and then you don't get the full data you need. Being involved would be like very good for patients who use it on like monthly basis or use it like constantly. I think if we get a group of us, like a lot of heart kids and heart like adults and babies have to wear the exact same devices, and if you just get like a little survey, I think would even work to see how you can improve the advice.
I personally do not mind sharing my information with the researchers. I think if anything can lead to positive creations or new innovative ideas, I think anything along those lines, I'd be more than happy to share more information. I think trying to help as many people as possible is the ultimate goal when you live with a condition too. So if that means you're giving up some of your information, I think that only leads to good things. So anytime there's any error with anything, we send it back to the company. They look at it, they try to dissect it and see what happened with it. Sometimes it can just be user errors too. So my sensors are supposed to last 10 days. If they don't last the full 10 days, we can send it back and get a replacement one for those last couple of days. But yeah, they really take in your opinion for a lot of things. So
I would feel okay about that and good about it.
That's kind of where ICANN comes in, because their whole point is saying like, kids' research really matters, you know, and the other issue is also awareness of even diagnosis. So as I kind of mentioned earlier, it's often misdiagnosed.
I have no problem sharing my personal data with the researchers. I think if it's going to benefit the community as a whole, then that's what's most important. And knowing that you made a difference by sharing yourself and giving your feedback, then it's not only going to help you, but it's going to help other people.
I would love to share my data. I've done it every single surgery. I'm in a ton of clinical trials. If like anything that I do or I've been through can like help in any way, I'd love to share it. So.
That's a pretty big one, like helping them test it to see if it works. That's it, I guess. Maybe give like suggestions on how to improve it.
It's really important for people to hear the voices of those affected by the research and the new manufacturing of medications and all that stuff.
I want to encourage any researcher to take in the opinions of youth in the medical field. I think taking in opinions and feedback from any young person is so helpful, especially if they are living with a disease. A lot of times they know so much about it and they just are overlooked a lot of the times because they're so young or they're not viewed as being like an expert, but in fact they are, and a lot of times they can give you really great information about living with a disease.
I think that it's really important to speak on medical things because a lot of people don't. They think that like it has to be that way, or like they can't do anything about it, especially people like new in the medical world or people who haven't had conditions their whole life. Often just think like, oh, this is how it has to be, and it's not that way at all. And so as someone who's like comfortable talking about like my experiences and also very open about my health, I think it's important that I like speak about my experiences and how to make things better, not for me, but also for every other person who doesn't feel comfortable speaking up.
I would like to say thank you to ICANN for letting us have this platform to share our voice. I think it's important for me to speak today because I'm giving my feedback and sharing my voice so I can be heard, but also using my voice as a way to talk for those who might not be able to or don't want to. And everybody has a voice, so we have to start somewhere.
Well, this was definitely a meaningful and revealing video. We will absolutely like to thank all the children and young patients from ICANN that shared their stories. Well, and now we are thrilled to get our first live speaker today, Amy Omer. Amy is a mother of 2 children with type 1 diabetes and director of the International Children Advisory Network, ICANN. Amy is specialized in creating collaboration through patient-centric programs by focusing on the needs of patients and families. And she's an active advocate for clinical research, especially in type 1 diabetes, and involved in several initiatives at this level. Amy has recently been acknowledged by her work by the Sally Joy Award in 2019 from the State of Michigan Diabetes Patient Advocacy Council. And in 2020, she received the Type 1 Diabetes Outstanding Patient Advocate Award from the T1D Exchange. Amy, it's a pleasure to have you here today. Before we start, and we start getting more questions, can you please say what is the drive and what is the passion that takes you through all this topic?
Sure, and thank you for having me today. This is a wonderful honor and something, well, I wish I didn't have to speak about. I am always so glad to have an audience that's willing to listen and help make improvements and positive change. So thank you today. So my driving force, Inez, as you had just asked, is really my kids. This started a few years ago for us as a family, and I realized that this really needed a focus. And as a wife and a mother, when something like this happens in your family and your children are diagnosed with a chronic condition that is lifelong, there is no cure for type 1 diabetes at this point. It is really important that you do what you can. So I like to say my secret skill is I am an artificial pancreas impersonator. So what I do is I creep around all hours of the day and ensure that my kids are getting what they need, because having insulin is how they stay alive. So it boils down to something that's very necessary and needed for their health and their development and being able to do anything they want. I'm also the director of the International Children's Advisory Network. So when I came into this position, I came in not just for my own children, but for all the children everywhere in the world. I like to say that, I have kids everywhere, because it is so important and so meaningful to be able to speak for those who may not be able to, or may not want to, or may not even know that it's an opportunity at this point. So another plug that I always have is, if you have a young person in your life that would like to share their story, please send them to us. We would love to have them. We would love to work with them to better understand what they need and how we can help. We're really a platform to get them to where they need to be. So you can reach me. I'm an open book. Any questions after this today, do not be shy. Don't hesitate. My email is right on there, amyomer@icanresearch.org. You can reach me on Twitter, and please check out our website, because it does have lots of testimonials from kids all around the world. We would love to have you there.
Much, Amy. Now, a little bit of your experience. As you mentioned, you have 2 children that have type 1 diabetes. When did your children started to use devices, and how often do they wear those devices? Can you give us a little bit of your experience?
Yeah, let's go to the next slide, because I think this is a great visual to really illustrate where we were and where we are now. So as I like to point out, having an illness or a condition like type 1 diabetes is very invisible. So here's a picture on the left-hand side of your computer screen where my children were no longer being able to make insulin. It was not happening in their pancreas. And then later today, where we are right now, and neither one produce any insulin at all. And they're healthy. You can't see from a naked eye what is happening inside their bodies, but this is a 24/7 commitment. Insulin is a life necessity, and the only way to stay alive is through the production or the injection of insulin. So going to the next slide, I'll give you a timeline of how that happened. And we can see that. So my first child, I only have two, was diagnosed, we call her Livy, that's her nickname, in 2006. And when she was diagnosed, it was urgent. We spent quite a bit of time in the hospital. We are very lucky that she is still with us today because it was such a crisis moment for us. The diagnosis had been missed because at the time, it was not very clear in 2006, which doesn't seem that long ago, that small children, toddlers could actually be diagnosed with something like this. It was thought of more to be an adolescent condition, and pediatricians just often mislook that and did not see the need to do a simple urinary test. So when she was diagnosed, we were in a very difficult situation. Her blood sugar was averaging about 800 per milligrams deciliters per day, and that is outrageously high considering a normal, typical functioning blood sugar in a child is right around the 80 to 90, 100 mark. Anything higher than that, really. So when she was diagnosed, we immediately embraced technology. So that is Christmas time in 2006, right where we are today. We're about to celebrate her anniversary, or what we call her diaversary. In 2007, just a couple months later, we had pushed for a first medical device, and it was an insulin pump. So as you can see there, the pump was about her entire midsection. We had to get a bag for her to be able to carry around her insulin pump. It was heavy. Her total weight was about 20 pounds, 25 pounds, and the insulin pump was a couple pounds added to that. So you can imagine what that was like for a toddler. Then just 3 years later, our second child, our oldest, was also diagnosed. But what was very interesting about that, and why I like to point out, is because we had that learning and we knew, we were able to start her immediately with an insulin pump. Probably even before most providers would think that she actually needed it. And because of that, she was able to maintain super tight control with her insulin. And her A1Cs remained very, very low. She stayed in optimal health. And we were able to microbolus her much better than we would have if we'd been on injections. Just because there's a human element to it.
And do you consider that having the previous experience empowered you to pursue for advances in technology and also to understand the condition itself? It was a different experience?
Yes, very much so. I say the first diagnosis gave us the understanding of what we were dealing with and the learnings of how to manage type 1 diabetes. And the second diagnosis really propelled us into advocating and understanding how we could use the tools that were at hand and how we could make them, work for our family and also to help other families on that journey. So, it's a very empowering, and it really does make a difference in becoming what I like to call now patient as an expert. Well, we are not doctors, and I never, try to display myself as someone through medical school, but I also have this huge wealth of information from just learning how to deal with type 1 diabetes and how to use the pumps and all the devices that go along with it. So if you hop into your next slide, you can see a little bit more about that. This thought is kind of taking on what Inez just said. All the world is full of suffering, but it is also full of overcoming. And right there, I think that's a great quote to show that we took that knowledge and we channeled it into something very positive to make a difference for our family and to show what we could do with this knowledge that we had. So if you go on to the next slide, you can see a little bit more of what it looked like for us. So on the left-hand side, these are some of the pumps the girls have worn over the years. And I like to point this out because there really hasn't been this huge wealth of change and knowledge of what devices are out there. We've been doing this, as I mentioned, since 2006, and relatively, the pumps are very similar to what they are today. There has been some advancements in AI technology where some of the pumps are working better with the sensors that you see on the right-hand side, but the continuous glucose sensor technology has probably improved more than the actual pump technology. The pump technology is still working off the same display of continuing to dispense insulin. So if you go on to the next slide, you can see what the girls use today. And their current pump actually works with the sensor. The sensor is right in front of that little pump, and it helps to dispense insulin based on what their blood sugar levels are at. And you can see how the glucose monitor on the right, how that's injected. That big piece behind it is actually the injector. It's an auto injector, which is nice, but still very cumbersome, very large, difficult to throw into a purse or a bag to carry with you. It's not ideal. If you go on to the next slide, you can see some of the things that we've learned. Little bodies just don't have a lot of real estate. Diapers don't have waistbands, so you can imagine trying to clip a pump to it. It's also not the most sanitary thing. Toddlers still like to push buttons. We used to have to hide the pump on the back of a t-shirt. Little girls' clothing really just does not have pockets, and that I think also holds true for a lot of little boy clothing. At night, it's dark, so you can imagine just trying to get in there and see what you're doing when you're dispensing a medical device dose. And sleeping or sitting can still cause compression errors, which cause false readings, which then dispense potentially the wrong amount of insulin. Adhesive is not glue. It does not help to keep everything on a little body, so it's very difficult. And you can see the picture earlier, prom dresses, things like that, wedding dresses, very much a challenge. And then also college independence doesn't mean letting any of this go. It means that the child then has to take everything on. So the next slide, I'll wrap up quickly because I think I'm running out of time. But what we learned from all of this is to really encourage sharing our voices. So, we're part of ICANN. We wanted to be here with all of our friends through UPADI and PFMD. And it's so important for patients to be able to have that seat at the table to help share what we've learned. I think that's the number one thing. If I could give you anything from this event, it's to make sure that you include patients.
Thank you so much, Amy. This was brilliant. And indeed, I had a lot of questions, but time is ahead of us. So any question, please write in the chat box and they will be answered right away. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. And now it's time to move to our next presentation. We are now going to move to learn a little bit more about the MedTech perspective. And I'm happy to share with you that the next pre-recorded video will be is prepared by Elisa Ferrer, Patient Advocacy Manager at the MedTech company Apparito. For those who don't know the company, Apparito is revolutionizing clinical trials by leveraging patient-generated data. And that's what we'll hear more about in the next 10 minutes, with a specific focus on collaboration with patients, children and young patients, which is what we are here today for. And just another word about Elisa. She manages the patient group Accelerator program, which aims to address the high unmet needs of patient communities by co-developing new digital endpoints with patient groups. Now let's see the presentation.
Good afternoon. My name is Elisa Ferrer-Mallol, Patient Advocacy Manager at Apparito. I would like to thank the organizers for inviting us to present our experience engaging young patients and families through the Apparito's Patient Group Accelerator program. Just a few words about Apparito. Apparito is a medical technology company specialized in capturing patient-generated data and digital endpoints outside the hospital setting. We want to change the way that clinical trials are done by taking the trial to the patient, improving the patient's experience in the clinical trial, and at the same time, gather highly relevant and patient-generated data to help streamline the drug development process. Aparito's technology is called 8on5, is a disease and language agnostic technology platform that can be configured to capture patient-reported outcomes via smartphone. It can also capture a video and audio and analyze those with pattern recognition, going beyond traditional assessments. The platform can also integrate wearables and other devices for passive data capture. As you have seen, the opportunities offered by the technology are huge, but is everything that we can measure relevant for patients? The Patient Group Accelerator program aims to address some of the challenges that patients participating in clinical trials, such as the burden that the trial visits can place on young children and their families. For example, for children for children with complex and chronic conditions, the distance travel to the hospitals where the clinical assessments are done can pose a real burden on them and on their families. Families and parents and carers need to take time off work, and there's also an economic impact by participating in the trial. All these can also affect the performance of completing the test. Actually, as you can see on the right side of the screen, what the doctor sees in one of these appointments is very different from what the patient experiences at home dealing with their disease on a daily basis. Patients have good days and bad days, and this single snapshot doesn't capture the reality of the condition. Also, there are challenges regarding data quality. There can be lower retention in clinical trials due to the high burden, and then those missing tests may lead also to missing data. And again, what it's measured may not be what is important for patients and their families, or what they consider meaningful. In pediatric research, there's also a lack normally of age-appropriate endpoints, and also for disease-specific validated endpoints, which sometimes are borrowed from other broader disease areas. So the Patient Group Accelerator program aims at addressing these challenges by co-developing together with the patient communities new digital endpoints. It's a co-creation process. We aim to design a patient-driven solution. We also, through this program, aim to use the technology and the data to give patients a voice in clinical trials and clinical care, and help design and develop digital endpoints that are specific and relevant for each disease. This is a 6-month program. It's high pace, but we also strive to deliver high-quality outcomes. There's the commitment to share ownership and any future intellectual property that might emerge from the collaboration. And then at the end of the program, and subject to the outcomes and the experience that we had, there's the commitment to progress. So how we do it? Like I said earlier, the program lasts for 6 months, in which we work very closely with the patient group and their community. We sign a collaboration agreement at the start that sets the basis for the collaboration, confidentiality aspects, data management, and also this shared ownership. Aparito, as such, does not have access to personal patient data, only at pseudonymized level, and the data is stored independently in a secure server. As you see all along the process, we work in close contact, like I said, with the patient group in total co-creation mode, but also reach out to other experts if necessary. So we start by identifying the unmet needs, and then we want also to see what is being used out there and what is missing, and identify those gaps for the development. Always we discuss with the patient organization on the best way to reach out to the broader community, to reach out to the children, or to other members of the community, carers or parents. So we design interviews and surveys and with patients to identify potential digital endpoints. And then we develop the requirements specifically for deploying the technology. Then we test the usability of the technology, and we collect some data that will help us analyze a bit the potential value of the clinical solution. So the expected outcomes at the end of the program is to demonstrate that the technology is feasible, that is accepted, and is usable by the end user. We gather exploratory data to support the clinical utility of the technology, and then enable software compliance for future qualification of these endpoints and marketing of the technology. So at the end of the process, we together we evaluate how the collaboration has been, and whether we pursue on next steps and we continue the collaboration. I want to show you a couple of examples from the first round of the Accelerator program that we launched last year, and we engaged with Duchenne UK. And the need that was identified is that that there are no clinical outcome measures that can capture the transition from the ambulatory to the non-ambulatory stage of the disease, what it's called the transfer stage. And it would be very valuable for Duchenne patients to be able to evaluate the transfer stage, these transfers from the bed to wheelchair, and so on. There's also the need of reducing the burden of clinical on-site assessments, and therefore there's a need for home-based assessments and a system that can enable that. We identified which were the relevant tasks to assess during the transfer stage, and then an app, a specific app was developed to allow home video capture and analysis of relevant tasks. So that's just a snapshot of the app. Here you can see the patient can choose from the relevant task that needs to be performed, and there are instructional videos that show how the task should be conducted, and then you can record the children in this case performing the task, and then you submit it to the system. So we are continuing exploring if this could have like potential clinical value, and we are very happy to continue the collaboration with Duchenne UK. We also have engaged with a PCD support group in the UK. PCD stands for primary ciliary dyskinesia, which is a rare genetic respiratory condition that can lead to progressive loss of the lung function. It is caused by malfunction of the motile cilia in the airways, and there's as a result there's a buildup of mucus in the airways that can lead to infections, and that require the use of antibiotics and hospitalization of the patient at some point. So in order to prevent those exacerbations and this accumulation of mucus, the patients need to perform airway clearance techniques daily, which the disease strongly affects patients' quality of life. But then there's also, it was identified that the engagement with airway clearance techniques will be, it's key for the well-being of the patient and for avoiding the exacerbations. So with PCD, we are exploring if the use of the technology in the form of an app and wearables might have an impact on the engagement on the prescribed airway clearance techniques in patients with primary ciliary dyskinesia. So we are very happy also to continue working with PCD support group in the UK. The Accelerator 2.0 has been launched. Applications are, we are currently accepting applications. And if you want more information, please don't hesitate to contact us and check our website as well. Thank you very much for your attention.
And now it's time again to include you, everyone that's here. So we have another poll for you as well. And I suggest that we just start with the first question. So Maria, can you start the poll? So we really want to know, based on everything that you heard, based on everything that you know, what do you see as the main added value in the involvement of children, young patients, and parents in the design and development of medical devices? I'll just wait for the answers to come in. So the currently winning answer seems to be that the patient's perspective on device usability and efficiency is the main added value of the involvement of children, young patients, and parents in the design of the solution. So now we can go to the second question. What is on the other poll, the main challenge, or what are the main challenges in the involvement of children, young patients, and parents in medical devices? What do you think? In the beginning, when we launched the first poll, I think the majority of the answers were that not many people here have actually been included as young patients or children in the development of medical devices. The two main winning answers for these questions are that the main challenge is the lack of interest from the medtech sector towards this patient group and limited opportunities for collaboration, but most importantly, lack of understanding about the work and opportunities for patient engagement for all stakeholders. Perhaps we can bridge some of those gaps here today. The third question is, how would you like to enhance the cooperation between children, young patients, parents, and the medtech industry? What do you think is the most suitable option? So I think we can close this question as well. It seems that most people believe that sharing best practices about patient engagement and the benefits of it among the different stakeholders could be another step to enhancing the cooperation. Also creating communication channels and platforms that could support collaboration between different stakeholders. Can we see the end results? So yes, here are the results, as I mentioned. We've got two more questions to go before we go to our next session. So I would like to move to the next question as well. So how prepared do you all feel about patient engagement with specific groups in medical devices? So I think we can close this question also related to the activity that's happening. I guess we don't have too many open questions here, since most people answered that they feel somewhat prepared in the engagement of specific patient groups. But now let's move to the last question as well. So what kind of training would you like to be organized for different stakeholders about patient engagement in medical devices? Maybe some of the ideas can pop up here for the future. So yeah, just share your thoughts related to the options that are available. If you feel that an option is not available, feel free to write it in the chat. So the key answer here would be combined into one answer, I guess, community. So joint trainings for the medtech sector, patients, young patients, and parents, and at the same time, a joint platform with the opportunities to share trainings about the basic principles of patient engagement. With that, I think we can close the second poll. Thank you everyone for participating. And now this can be a great cue for our next speaker. I would like to welcome with us Leanne West. She's the principal research scientist and the chief engineer of pediatric technology at the Georgia Institute of Technology. Leanne is also the president of the International Children's Advisory Network, ICANN, which promotes the importance of the pediatric patient voice in research and development. We saw the video before from ICANN. And also I would like to mention that Leanne has spent the last 25 years in technology development, focusing on pediatric care. So it's going to be interesting to hear her research perspective on the topic. Now, Leanne, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and thank you for the introduction. Super excited to talk about some of the technology development that we have been doing. If you want to go to the next slide. So she introduced me, so I don't need to say these things, but I will add that I also come from a patient perspective. I myself live with a couple of rare diseases, and so I like to think that between ICANN and the research that I do and the insights that I've gained personally, that I really do take the patient experience into account when we do development of technologies. And so one of the things that I wanted to share is that we work in all different areas of technology development, and it can even be about policy, mobile devices, implantable medical devices, using AI on imaging and that type of thing. But what I'm going to talk to you today about is really what we do in wearable devices. So next slide. So here you can see a child who is connected to ECMO, and it's just a mess to look at. So many tubings, like you can barely see the child in the picture, and it just breaks my heart every time I see this. And then the yellow circle is looking at the vital signs of the child, and you can imagine looking at all of these things, information just tends to get lost. So next slide. So one of the things that we're working on at Georgia Tech is flexible electronics or soft electronics. And so on the left, you see a hand with kind of the hard, rigid electronics on it, the baby just above that with all sorts of wires and devices strapped to them. But then what we're trying to do is take away some of that and just do small wireless devices. And so you can see the flexible electronics in the hand and how it would look like on the child. And so it's much less obtrusive for what the child is experiencing. Next slide. And so we're making this biopatch, and we're super excited to use it. All the information is sent to a cell phone, as well as showing up on that monitor that I had highlighted in the previous example. And what we've been doing with it is doing EKGs, looking at respiration, motion, temperature, breathing rate. And we're trying to take that all into account and do predictive algorithms with it. So use this data to help determine what child is ready to transfer out of the ICU. And so in retrospective studies with our data, we have been able to show that we are better at predicting which child is ready to leave the ICU than some of the doctors are. So we were super excited about that because we think this is going to be a huge benefit when everything really does start moving towards data and analysis of data for healthcare. So next slide. Here's an example. It's also being used right now in Ethiopia, and you can see the little tiny device on the child's chest. And so again, we think this is good, not just in the US, but also in more lower resource settings. Next slide. So here's another example of a technology we are building. So there's a problem called IV infiltration. And what that means is that when you get an IV, if the needle bursts through the vein, pops the vein, or even misses the vein, then you can have that medicine that's supposed to be going into your vein, going into your, underneath your skin, right at the site of the IV. And this is bad for a couple of reasons. One, you're not getting the medication that you're supposed to. But two, it can have really horrible consequences, as you can see in the picture. So it can totally eat away any soft tissue, nerves, tendons, muscles, skin, and leave a child or an adult, this happens in adults too, with permanent scarring and permanent loss of use. So next slide. So one of the things that we've created is a device that can detect IV infiltration when it happens. And so right now you can see it's a little bit big in this little green format there. but it is something that the patient would wear around the site of the IV throughout the length of having the IV. But eventually we want to use those soft electronics that I mentioned earlier to put it in around the dressing or the bandage that goes over the site of the IV. Next slide. We're super excited about this one because if anyone out there does data analytics, typically it's a lot of nuancing and it's kind of, difficult to find things. You have to really play around with the algorithms. But for this, it's very clear. So in the bottom left-hand table, you see the red squiggly line and you can see that huge drop. Well, that is what a signal looks like when an IV is not working properly or when you're having an IV infiltration. And so we've had, at this point, over 600 hours of data from children in a hospital. We have had the IV in various locations, from the wrist, the hands, the feet, and the forearm. And we have only had 2 false alarms in the whole time that we've been looking at the 569 hours. And we've detected everyone that was supposed to happen. So that was very exciting. Next slide. So here's another one. This is looking at juvenile idiopathic arthritis. It uses a wearable microphone sensor on the joint. And you can see where it's easy to tell that the child has arthritis and the joint is behaving badly versus either not having arthritis and or after treatment. 2 very distinct curves to show the separation between the 2. Next slide. Here's another example of a wearable exoskeleton that also has some intelligence to it and some robotic, can't think of the word, but robotics are built into it. And this has really helped to help kids with cerebral palsy and walking. A lot of the braces are not rigid, and or a lot of the braces are rigid and don't have electronics. This one does, and so it knows if you're walking on an incline or upstairs, and it gives a little robotic boost to help the child take the step a little bit better. So again, just taking in that data all the time. Next slide. Here's another one where children with prosthetics, we're looking to make the prosthetic a little bit smarter and put sensors in the prosthetic that can take environmental things like pressure and force, and then send that signal to a different part of the child's body that is functioning properly, and to help that child better understand and better learn to use that prosthetic and have a better experience overall. Next slide. And one last thing. So, we talk about wearables, but with everybody having a cell phone, I mean, that is essentially a wearable. It is taking data on you all the time, and you can do some really cool things with it. So we've had one student who has an anemia problem, and he built an app that you can take a picture of your nail bed and you can determine your anemia level just from that. So no finger prick or anything like that. And he can take his anemia level at any time of day really quickly. And it also stores all that information that he can give to the doctor. Another one here is something we called URAP, and it's for looking at proteins in the urine. And really what it does is after a urine stick, after you use a urine stick, it can take a picture of it and determine what the protein level is. It works with the top urine strips that are available in the US, the top 3. And that's, again, just another way to be able to use something to collect that data and be able to make some sense of it a little bit better than what we can do now based on memory or whatever it might be. So those are some things that we're doing. We do always put children in the loop. And you saw in the one picture a little bit back where I was talking about the robotic exoskeleton, the child on the walking, the moving plane, moving floor. And that's a healthy child that they used to test the system and test the testing before they used it with kids with cerebral palsy. So again, it's important to bring kids in at any point in the process. And I think that's it for me. Next slide, if there is one. and there's not. So thank you very much for having me today. Always happy to answer questions about any kind of device, and my email address is at the bottom of the slide.
Thank you, Leanne, for your presentation and very interesting examples of collaboration and development. So if anyone has any questions for Leanne, as mentioned, you can either write them in the chat. We might also be able to address them in the panel discussion that's coming on the program very soon. But before that, we still have one speaker. So I would like to give a warm welcome to Begonia Nafria Escalera. She works as a patient engagement in research coordinator at the Sant Juan de Déu Hospital in Barcelona, and has long experience in involving patients and families in research initiatives, specifically in the field of clinical trials. Hi, Begonia. Begonia is also an EUPATI Fellow and coordinator of the European Young Patient Advisory Group, many other things as well, working on a PhD in patient involvement in the pediatric field specifically. And now she's going to introduce the new EIT Health project. Begonia, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for the opportunity to introduce this project. This is a collaborative initiative granted by the EIT Health. As you know, EIT Health is a partnership between the European Commission and different companies and organizations working at the European level in the field of health. Said this, it's important to realize that the need that we want to cover with this project is to ensure that at the European level we have the right environment to involve children and young people in clinical research. Last year we were working in the same project in the field of clinical trials, and this year we are working specifically in the field of medical devices. Said this, it's important to mention that the young people at the European level and in general around the world represents more than the 20% of the population. But at the end, young people are our future, and we need obviously to invest for a better society and for a healthy society. And in this sense, the only way that we know to realize patient-centric clinical research and any other activity in health science, it's involving the patients. And when we talk about pediatric patients, obviously we need to ensure that the voice of the patients, it's there. It's important to realize that any activity that we perform in the field of involving children and young people, it's a right. We used to refer the right to science, the right to be involved in research. And there is, the Convention of the Rights of the Child that in 1989 mentioned two important rights. One is the one related to the freely express the views of the children and young people. And the second one, that is the Article 24, it's the right regarding the process to access a right healthcare, and in this sense, any activity that can improve the health of the children and the young people. And in this sense, for us, it's very important to ensure that the voice of children and young people is part of the research process. Said this, for us, the people working in pediatrics, we need to face, many challenges. The one is that mainly we are working with rare diseases. It means, few number of patients, chronic, life-threatening, and very complex conditions. In this sense, we need more research. In some ways, probably, the best approach is to have, better treatments. In other cases, is to have, the right medical devices to provide a better opportunity of a better quality of life for our patients. Said this, the GEA project allows us to provide a capacity building program for children and young people, standardize this training across the different European countries, and facilitate the cross collaboration between different groups of young people, because trials in medicines and also now with the new European regulation of medical devices, it's an international activity. In this screen, you can see the digital environment of the GEA toolkit. addressed specifically for clinical trials with the 4 models that it covers. Something that is very important for us is to work from the educational point of view in a methodology that can be very similar to the real world. And in this sense, in every of these models, we have a case study to focus the activities to train young people with real opportunities that probably they can face when they are involved in real projects. In your screen, you can see Sally. Sally, she's a young person living with lupus, and around this condition, we have plenty of educational activities to deliver training sessions to young people. And this year, we have been working in the design of a digital toolkit, in this case for medical devices, and with 3 modules. The first one is focusing the design of medical devices. The second one that for us it's very important, it's focusing the data sharing and the rights of the young people, because as you can imagine, all these digital medical devices are based in the use and in the analysis of data. And the last model is about how we can involve children and young people in the design of medical devices and in the clinical trials of these devices, and obviously in the dissemination about the awareness that it's important to have to ensure that the voice of the children and young people are part of this process. This is a screenshot about how every of these models works. We have the educational objectives, different tasks, and something that for us is very relevant is that this year we have created a serious game to educate young people in the health data rights. This is another screenshot of the case studies that we are using to train young people in the medical devices staff. And as I have mentioned, for us it's a really meaningful activity this year, this game, that it's organized in different missions with different challenges in order to ensure that young people, they know about the rights that are behind the process to collect and analyze their data. This is, a very hard topic for children and young people, and we thought that using a serious game would be more meaningful the training process. There are several screenshots in these slides that you can see now, which is the appearance of this game, that it's mobile first, and you can access through your browser in your computer or through your mobile phone. Said this, it's very important that you know that this educational content has been co-created with young people. We deliver in 2021 5 co-creation sessions to create these educational activities for the digital toolkit, the lesson plans for the facilitators of the young persons advisory groups and teachers of high schools, and also to co-create this game that I just introduced to all of you. This is a screenshot about the guidance that we provide to facilitators and teachers to perform this training program. Something that is relevant is that the training is not organized in an itinerary. Every facilitator of a young person's advisory group or a teacher in a high school can pick up specifically the activity that is interested to perform with the group. And this allows us, anytime that we want to involve children and young people in real projects before this, to provide the right background, because as you can imagine, young people, it's naive in science and specifically in medical devices. And for the European colleagues that are online today, it's very important to have on mind the new European regulation on medical devices that that establishes that it's mandatory to work with clinical studies. It means that there are plenty of opportunities to involve children, young people, and obviously adult patients along this process. It's an important area. Involve them in the protocol, in any documents that at the end will be addressed to the real patients involved in these clinical studies, the assent or the consent form, and obviously involve them in the tools and in the means that we are going to use to analyze the impact of these medical devices in the health of the patients, involving them in the co-creation or in the validation of the patient-reported outcomes, or any activity in the field of the patient experience. And something that is important that you know is that this training that we have designed with a consortium that at the end I will present to all of you, it's addressed obviously to patients' organizations, to young persons advisory groups, and in general to the society, because also we have plenty of medical devices that are not only focused in a specific disease. And in this sense, any high school interested to access to the training program is more than welcome. And finally, how we are organized at the European level to have this international collaboration that I have mentioned in my talk. It's through a network. WIPACnet is the European Young Persons Advisory Groups network that has the recognition of EMA. And it has been founded in 2017 for WIPACs around Europe. And at this moment, we have groups across many countries. We provide the right tools to create new teams, and we try to work in parallel with the same projects, the same methodology, and obviously gathering this very important perspective of diversity that in any patient involvement activity needs to be considered. And this is a nice picture of the young people involved in the co-creation of the YEA program. You can see here which are the partners of this project. And also you have here my email if you want to know more about this initiative. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Begonia. I would now like to give a warm welcome to all the speakers that are with us here live, so we can have just a very brief Q&A session. Since most questions were already answered in the chat, I would maybe just ask a general question to the three speakers. So we saw, also through the polls that there's an interest to be involved in the development of medical devices from both sides, but there still seems to be a gap in terms of who to turn to either reach out to patients, or how can patients even learn about a company searching for patients to be involved in trials and in the development. What would your general advice be? How can we find projects such as the one that you just presented, Begonia, if we start with you?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Tasha. From our part, as I have mentioned, we are organizing a network at the European level, and we are working so hard in two important pillars. One, obviously, it's the awareness, and we are just opening and disseminating this training program through the different, groups that they can benefit of the training, WIPACs, patients organizations, and high schools. But in parallel, and it's really important, we need to approach all the companies working with medical devices to explain that there is, another way to design and to perform the clinical studies with medical devices. For us, because we are a children's hospital, it's quite easy because we have an innovation department in our institution, and we are very close, to facilitate the involvement of our patients in the design of the medical devices that we create. But obviously, we need to approach more to the companies, because still, there is a lot of need of awareness to understand that it's feasible, involve minors in these activities.
Thank you, Leanne. Maybe you can go from there, and just I'm wondering, do you only work with patients that are at your institution, or are people from outside also coming in?
Absolutely. So we work with children from all over. We work with hospitals around the world. I think that, if you're interested in working with kids, feel free to reach out to Begonia through the information she gave, or to Amy or I for ICANN. But also, talking about industry, if you are industry, you might look at, or even a hospital, you might look at the International Society for Pediatric Innovation. They do a lot of work connecting people as well there. So I think there are a lot of resources out there, but I think contacting any of the three of us, we can get you where you need to be to make things happen for you.
Thanks, Leanne. And Amy, your last words. I'm not sure if this question isn't even foreign to you, since this is basically what you're trying to do all the time, connect the dots so meaningful outcomes come to life.
Yeah, so, for us, I would like to just encourage, any young person has a voice, and we want to make sure that we get them to where they need to be. And the way we operate is very simple. We have our website, we have our projects and opportunities listed at all times. The kids can send in an email and say, I want to be involved. They can also, I love to throw this out there, dream up their own project. So if they want to share a video of themselves talking and explaining what they're going through, we love to connect them with that ability to do so and share it. Because oftentimes, having their voice recorded is a stepping stone to getting them to a better outcome, a better project, and it creates those aha moments with professionals. So definitely anything the kids would like to do, anything we can do as as support of kids, even parents, we're welcoming to that. We would love their perspectives as well. So we're very open and very engaged.
Thanks, Amy. The general conclusion would be there's been a lot of context mentioned throughout the session today. If in case you haven't had time to write any of those down, I'm just adding the email from Eupati, where you can either write any questions that you come up with after this session, or for any follow-up questions that might not have been addressed in the Q&A. And with that, I would like to move to the closing remarks for today. We really thank you, everyone that joined the session today. We hope we answered some of the questions, highlighted some of the options of how can industry and patients, especially young patients, work together more, and parents, of course, in the name of those patients and in collaboration with those patients. We hope that you have enjoyed this session, learned some valuable lessons, so we can all take action together to engage pediatric young patients and parents in the implementation and development of medical devices. I would like to also say that your feedback is important and means a lot to us. So please take a couple of minutes for some feedback after this session ends. The survey will automatically open in your browser right after this meeting. I would also like to say that post-session resources will be available within a couple of days, and invite you to some of the upcoming sessions. We've got one more session today, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so starting soon. Right after this one, there will be 2 other sessions on December 9th. So do check them out and register on the PEOF webpage. And once again, thank you for joining us. Thank you for the sponsors that enabled this event to happen. And let's work together to spread the word of the Patient Engagement Open Forum. So here are, on the next slide, please, here's all the social media platforms and links where you can find Patient Engagement Open Forum, share it with your network, because we did see today that if there's one thing that we can all contribute to is raising awareness, working on advocacy to bridge the gap between the industry and the patient. So thank you for your attention and have a great rest of the day.